All right, welcome to part 2 of responding to hoaxes and fakes on Thursday, although it's still Wednesday for us. I'm going to share Common Sense Media Education's lesson plan for freshmen around the topic that Jonathan shared yesterday. And so again, this is the Common Sense Media Education webpage. If you don't have an account, it's free and we highly, highly, highly recommend it. They have incredible lesson plans that we have been sharing with you for the past few weeks. And so we're going to head into the Fakes and Hoaxes lesson plan for 9th grade today and take a look at that. And then we're going to look at a tool that I would recommend you also checking out to extend this lesson a little bit further and maybe accomplish some other content standard goals that your class might have. So we're going to dive into the lesson plans portion of this website. And again, there are multiple entry points. I can filter by grade. I can scroll through all the grades and look at all of the lessons that Common Sense Media Education has ready for us to use. I'm going to go right to news and media literacy because that is the pillar that this lesson is under. And I am going to go down to 9th grade because that's the lesson that we're going to take a look at today, hoaxes and fakes. The essential, oh, yes.
Sorry, we just keep forgetting to say at the beginning, and I think 7 out of 8 times, Common Sense Education welcomes you, once you have that account, to take any of this material, modify it any way you want. And hilariously, like you're teaching about like appropriate, we talked about fair use a couple weeks ago. The fair use that they include is go ahead, do whatever you want. So as you're looking at what Kate's offering, Kate's reflecting on from their resources, please be aware that they not just are okay with, they welcome and encourage you to modify this, make it work with other lessons and fit into other places. And I feel like we always say that at the end. So I'll say at the beginning, as you're watching this,
Perfect.
as you look at it, you're like, oh, I could do that, but I need to blah. Go ahead, do that, make that, assume that you can make that shift.
Yeah, absolutely. So the essential question for this particular lesson is how can you avoid being fooled by fake videos and other information online? And I think I also say this every week. This is my favorite lesson. This lesson is so good. And I really, truly mean it. There's always their featured resource here to the right. In this case, it is their lesson plan slides, which are excellent. I will show them to you in a minute. Underneath, we have the standards that they have aligned to this lesson from the Common Core ELA, the CASEL standards, the AASL standards, and ISTE standards. So if you're working with any of those standards, they are aligned in this lesson for you, which is also really excellent and saves educators a lot of time. We've got our learning objectives for this lesson. So it's defining misinformation and exploring the consequences of spreading misinformation. Students are going to learn how to use lateral reading as a strategy to verify accuracy of information online. And then they're going to apply the lateral reading strategy to examples of questionable videos to determine their accuracy. I think this lesson is so much fun. And then underneath the vocab for the lesson. So students will understand these terms by the end of the lesson: corroboration, disinformation, lateral reading, and misinformation. So you've got all the goals and objectives right here at the top. We're going to dive into the lesson plan. They estimate that it takes 50 minutes, like all of their other lesson plans. It's really scripted out. So I was just saying to Jonathan, actually, I have not taught lessons to my students about hoaxes and deep fakes, although it's incredibly important. And after, preparing for this video, I'm definitely going back to my school in another year with this lesson because it is scripted out so that I feel completely confident diving into this lesson, even if I don't feel necessarily like I'm an expert in the topic. That's just how well they have created their lessons. So this lesson in particular, they don't always do this, but there is a note to teachers because they introduced this strategy called lateral reading, which I actually, I do it, but I didn't know that it was called lateral reading, and I've never explicitly taught it to my students. So they've given some articles so that if you want, you can do a little pre-reading about what lateral reading is. Although, like I said, if this is a lesson that you have to teach tomorrow with little to no prep time, they give you enough in the script to be able to teach about lateral reading without examining these resources. This lesson does include YouTube videos, so you will need to make sure that your school filter isn't blocking those YouTube videos because they are really the basis of this lesson, and it would be a bummer if you wanted to do this lesson and realize that you couldn't access any of the videos. So it starts with this great hook, you know, the teacher, Jonathan talked about in his lesson yesterday, the tree octopus, and that you can kind of generate some theatrical excitement around that. Same here. So, you know, it could start with the script. I don't usually do this in class, but have you all seen the amazing story of the pig who saved a baby goat from drowning? And of course, you know, no, we haven't, or maybe yes, we have, right? And so you can, you know, kind of generate a little excitement around that. I'm going to show you the super adorable video then of this little baby goat that was drowning, and this pig came along and saved it. And so they have given us the video here, of course, pig rescues baby goat. So you can show that to your students. It's adorable. It's exactly what it sounds like, a little goat in a pond, and a pig swims up to it and kind of bops it, and then they both swim up to the shore and everybody's happy. It's very sweet. Well, as it turns out, the script continues. Next, I want to show you how that amazing story was captured on video. So let's take a look. And there's another video called Nathan for You, Petting Zoo Hero. And it actually is done by Comedy Central. And so Comedy Central set this up. How do we create this viral video that is totally fake? And then what happens when we release that to the masses and they show you all the animal trainers, all the crazy tricks that they had to use to get the pig to navigate his way to the baby goat, the divers that were trying to hold the pig up in the water while it swam to get it to go the right direction, and holding the goat up so that it looked like it was stuck, and pigs are slipping everywhere and goats aren't cooperating. It's hysterical, but you see kind of the production element of a fake video. And then there's another video that you can use. It's not necessarily integral to the lesson, where they talk about, you know, how we made it go viral and then what happened once it went viral. So it's this great look at misinformation and disinformation, and also sometimes the production that goes into creating these, you know, hoaxes or the fake news. So it's a great hook into the lesson because the video is adorable. The Comedy Central video is very funny. And I just think that Common Sense Media Education really knocked it out of the park with this one because it's really so engaging.
Do you mind sliding up a little bit? There was one thing there that you mentioned that we didn't say again this week, which is the distinction between disinformation and misinformation. And I think it's a great one to make explicit to students. So there are number 4. This video is an example of disinformation, false information that is spread with the intent to deceive. And of course, they're doing that for a very clear purpose. And there's a sort of tongue-in-cheek aspect of it, and the fact that it's Comedy Central creating it, right? And the subject matter, as I said in our last session, being totally neutral, right? Who doesn't love a pig rescuing a goat? Versus misinformation, where that is information being spread, but without intent being the relevant, right? And I spoke last time about how one of the perspectives that's really sort of poignant in this is students finding themselves complicit in sharing disinformation created as disinformation without the intent, and then getting them thinking about, like, so by spreading what was created intentionally falsely with the belief yourself that it's true, there's a lot less sort of like malfeasance, or however you want to think about it. It's more like irresponsibility as opposed to like intentional. But I think getting it, the language of that and sort of the vocabulary in their minds, and that there is a really significant difference between the two types because of impetus and because of sort of the spirit of what was being done, is a really good opportunity for conversation as well. And as I noticed in this sort of central, the other thing that I wanted to say sort of as an aside is this gives you a really good example of it, but to emphasize what Kate said, every single lesson, every grade, every subject matter has this. And it often reminds me, if I didn't feel comfortable with this, of the way I feel when I have to administer standardized tests. I'm like, everyone, please seat yourself in a, right, the use of a calculator will make this, that whole narrative that I just feel so totally out of my skin, uncomfortable. The thing that's really nice about these is they're they're not just scripted, but they're in a way, like they sound like people. So kudos to Common Sense Education. And you could quite literally do what Kate said, is like open this as you walk in your classroom and teach it. But even with just a couple of minutes preparation, something that might otherwise feel a little foreign to you, really they do such a great job. So what you're seeing in this example, if you haven't seen it, is spot on all the way through in terms of their the effort and the resources that they put towards making sure that this is effective, and that, I mean, their major message is everyone should be teaching this, right? So they put their money where their mouth is, and they basically say, like, here you go. I'm not going to just tell you you need to do that. I will make it possible for you to be a part of that shift.
Right down to, and you can see in this example, right down to timing. Links are put right in here, for you, references to what slide number in the slideshow you should be, referencing. So they've, again, pig rescues baby goat video, your, the next video, the Nathan to the Petting Zoo by Comedy Central, every single aspect of it is right down to the, right down to the letter to the line. So it is very easy to use. All right, so after you've done this great pig and baby goat rescue, and you've kind of generated some excitement around this idea, it's time to dive in with your students about lateral reading. And so I'll just look at the script here. It says, there's so much information out there. We're consuming it, really quickly. And so it's really easy to get duped, right? Like, I mean, like Jonathan said, I can imagine having this conversation with my students. This sounds like a human being, saying the script. So today we're going to practice a strategy that will help you tell misinformation from credible information, whether it's fake videos or other questionable information that you encounter. And they have a handout, Read Laterally for Accuracy student handout. And their handouts, of course, are also excellent with hyperlinks to videos that students need to access. So again, everything is right in one place for students. And this video that they're going to use basically to teach a flipped lesson around lateral reading is a John Green video, John Green's crash course videos. And if you have not watched John Green's crash course videos, you are missing out. He does crash courses on just about anything and everything, and the students love them, of course, because it's John Green, who is an incredibly engaging speaker and author, and a lot of my students are familiar with him as an author. So John Green does this crash course in navigating digital information. And the first 9 minutes or so, they do tell you in the script, 1:15 to 9:15, are John Green talking about what lateral reading is. So you get this great flipped lesson, this handout to go along with the flipped lesson so that students are processing the information as they're hearing it, or maybe you give them a few minutes after the video to discuss it with a partner. So they again are giving you all the resources that you need to teach your students this new to me term of lateral reading. And so the idea that if you come across something that is questionable or that you need to ask questions about, you open up tabs across your browser to find websites and information that is credible and start to see how it corroborates. So you've got that vocab term working its way in. So how do these sites corroborate with each other to give you a picture of what is real or not? And those of us who are tab addicts, of course, like I am, I love lateral reading. I do it all the time. So it also speaks to that kind of, digital native aspect that Jonathan brought up yesterday as well, because our students often do read with a lot of tabs. So you can really talk about that as a skill and how to hone that in to look at deep fakes and hoaxes. So you've got that great lesson too.
One observation I also had that we don't always do in these conversations, and it occurs to me could be really helpful here. Do you mind, and forgive us here for a second as I direct Kate where to click, but she's screen sharing, not me. If you go to so we're looking for 1:15 is where it starts. According to this. So this, as Kate said, it's set up to be a flipped lesson if you want it to. If Kate slides over to 1:15, the share button in YouTube, a little further down, the arrow that goes to the right of dislike, when you click that, there is the option, which I noticed not that long ago, to start at 1:15 and the link changes to the number of seconds in. So if you're going to put this into like a Google Classroom spot, you can make the link relevant to where it's supposed to be without even having to edit the video. When the kids click, it will jump to there. So if that's not something you knew, a trick for you. And it reminded me to say that one of the other sort of, I feel like Common Sense Education does not pay us, in case you're wondering. They are a partner of MLTI 2.0, and we do a lot of their lessons very willingly, but we're not making money on the side here. Having said that, they integrate everything with Google Classroom. It is all completely set up for you to push a button and push out what you need to do, whether it's, make a copy of this document. All the assessments are Google Classroom. It's not really aligned, but Google Classroom set upified, so that they can be just seamlessly integrated into your class. And so another piece of this sort of message about everyone needs to do it, so here's how. And that to me was a really simple example of sort of where they put their money where their mouth is, but strikes me in this case, for example, where they've set it up so nicely to be flipped. One of the things they've really amplified is the ways that the resources are geared towards students who are remote, and whether that's synchronous or asynchronous. Increasingly, not all these lessons, but the general concept of these and many of the lessons were developed prior to the pandemic, and they've pivoted so nicely to make them not just updated and as relevant as possible, immediate as possible, but also just from the technical point of view, set up to be ready for whatever circumstances. So on a day like as Wyndham had to the other day, go full remote for 2 days because there wasn't enough faculty. When you just get dropped into one of those charming situations, as we're all finding we're having, now you have this opportunity to utilize the lesson in a really kind of quick way. So even if it is something you're totally comfortable with talking about and you plan to talk about, you can grab it from their arsenal and deploy it immediately as needed.
And just another plug, their resources are all available in English and Spanish, which I think is really incredible. And again, could it be any more user-friendly? So
also in British. If you speak British, they're all in British.
Oh, that's right, the British lesson plans. Yes. And then finally, this lesson wraps up with students practicing now that skill of reading laterally. So they've had that mini lesson from John Green, who I cannot get enough of. And then in the handout, so they've done this, in the handout, they are then given 3 videos: snowboarder girl chased by bear, loggers couldn't believe what they found in the middle of a tree, and proven turmeric cure cancer. And so students are given these videos. They have a little chart here where they can put in their corroborating source. So they're going to do some lateral reading, look for their own sources. Again, we're at grade 9. So we're thinking that, the students would be able to kind of find that independently or maybe with a partner, and then evidence to show how that source validates or debunks the video that they have chosen with their partner to analyze. So there's some student choice in here, which again, just, empowering those students to make choices around what they find interesting. Then they get that lateral reading practice, and then they get to determine if it is a hoax or if it's real. And then of course they need to provide evidence. So that's where the lesson concludes, but I want to extend this lesson a little bit further. And so I'm going to share with you a platform, a web-based platform called Parlay Ideas. It is a free platform for educators that creates space for students to hold online discussions. And it also uses technology to help students facilitate their own in-person roundtable discussions. So it does both in different ways. It's a massive website that it's just beautiful, and there's so much to offer. And I'm not going to go over the whole thing because I could talk about it for hours. But please do reach out if you want to talk about this platform and how to use it in your class, because I would love to talk more about that. But Parlay Ideas, one of the things that they do that is really amazing is that they have what they call a universe. And when you go to the universe in Parlay Ideas, it is all of these online roundtables that are already created for educators to use. And so I happened to find one called Modifying Media and Spotting Deep Fakes. And so I made a copy. So this actually looks like I made this prompt. I did not. When I make a copy of it, it pops it into your teacher file, and you can edit it to whatever you would like it to be if it doesn't quite fit your needs. But I find that when you find great stuff in the Parlay universe, I don't really need to edit it a lot. Again, this is like quick lesson planning. So this lesson that Parlay has set up says that today we're going to be discussing the concept of modifying pictures or videos to communicate a different idea. We're going to analyze a resource, we're going to consider if it's real or fake, and then we're going to share our ideas on the topic in this threaded online discussion. So we'll question, build on, and challenge each other's ideas in a respectful manner. And again, they have a lesson all created for you, so you can just review what's the deep fake, here's the definition, here's some more information on deep fakes. Great, you've got that kind of like reintroduction to deep fakes. And then, and this is, I think, the real gold of this lesson, I had no idea that this existed, but they link you to this resource and students to this resource called In Event of Moon Disaster. And this is what it looks like. It is this really great website. So in 1969, the world gathered to watch the moon landing. It was extraordinarily risky, so a backup speech was written in case the mission failed. Thankfully, it was never delivered until now. I just got chills. I'm not going to show you this video because the film itself is just over 6 minutes long, but you do watch Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin land on the, get in the spaceship, head on up, land on the moon, have some conversation, float around and do some stuff. And then you see Nixon giving the speech, the backup speech. And so, of course, Nixon never gave the backup speech, but here we are watching Nixon give the backup speech. And what we are watching, of course, is a deep fake video. And it's quite chilling. And at the end, it asks the students, it's kind of like a interactive website. So it asks, was the text of that speech real? Yes or no? And then it will tell you, you can click on it and it will tell you if you were right or wrong and give you background information. Was the video itself real? Yes or no? And same sort of deal. And I think it asks, was Nixon's face real or something along those lines? And then it gives you some information about what was real, what was not real, and how and why it was created. It's really, this website is quite beautiful. I hope, yeah, it will take me. So right, it starts with, can you spot a deep fake? Right? So I was like, yes, of course I can. And then it will take you through the film and then those questions. It also has these resources that are just amazing. So you've got a collection of articles, videos, and interactive experiences to help you understand deep fakes. Behind the scenes in the making of it. Again, it'll tell you if it's interactive or a video, synthetic media for good, an article on deepfake dystopia, the contingency speech itself, an article on media literacy in the age of disinformation, moon conspiracy theories debunked, right? Because students my students at least, are always talking about moon landing conspiracy theories. It's a thing. Can tech save us from deep fakes? There's a Scientific American documentary about it that they link up, and then why we made this deep fake and what they're hoping to achieve with this resource. And it is amazing. And like I said, I haven't taught this resource with my students, but I am definitely returning to my classroom with this lesson from Common Sense Media and this lesson from Parlay. And so once the students are in Parlay, it prompts them to answer some discussion questions and then prompts students to respond to each other. And again, I won't dive too deeply into it, but I will pop up a completed Parlay discussion that I did with my students last year. So this was a roundtable I did on Generation Z, technology, and anxiety. And I reached out to Parlay and asked them to develop this specifically for me, which they do. It's called their concierge service that is free to every educator. So you just reach out, you talk to a live human being, you tell them what your lesson goals are, and they create this and zap it over to your account. They even say, like, how long do we have to make this lesson? You know, and you can say a week or 2 weeks or, you know, 72 hours, and the lesson pops up for you. So they did create this specifically for me and my class. So we're discussing Gen Z's technology use as it impacts or does not impact their mental health. They put together some resources for me and my students. They put together these discussion questions, and then my students, one of the cool aspects of this website is that it allows students to be anonymous in the discussion. So they're given all these famous people to be, and they get a little biography, and the students love it. I had no idea how much they would love that. It was a total novelty, and they do. And so they can carry on these threaded discussions. Now, this was my honors class, so I required quite a bit of writing, but it gives the responders stems to use to help them respond appropriately to their peers. The teacher can set all of these up behind the scenes. And then when the conversation is over, it generates a summary of how the conversation went. And so it will give you actual data on that conversation. So 93% of my students submitted a response, 87% gave at least one comment, and it's got these reflection questions. So I use these with my students. Let's reflect on the conversation using these questions. You can see our average comment length. It creates a keyword cloud for us, gives us reflection questions to discuss. I starred some model submissions, which I did because I wanted to guide them toward the depth that I wanted them to be exploring in their written discussion. So it will pop these starred ones up. We could talk about, oh, why do you think your teacher starred those as model submissions? What about those are models? It creates this great Harkness circle that shows the flow of the conversation between my actual students. So each color is a student, and the colors and the swoops show how they were interacting with each other. And so I can see per student how many comments everybody made. Were they going back and forth? Was it just a one-way conversation? And then we can talk about, again, using their reflection questions, how we might improve that next time. So Parlay does more than this, but these are some of the most beautiful features. There are rubrics built in. You can assess them right here online, zap them out their feedback. Everything can be done right here. It's definitely a tech tool that I think everyone should be checking out. And again, I just found that really great resource through the Parlay universe, which looks like this. All the subjects and topics, everything you could ever want. Grade levels, teachers to follow who are creating great content, really amazing stuff, ready for educators to use. So all of this great material that's ready for educators to use from Common Sense Media, from Parlay, just makes our jobs of empowering our students that much easier. So highly recommend these tools, and especially these lessons. And again, please reach out if you want to talk more about Parlay, because I can do some PD for you, and we can do a nice deep dive into this program, this web-based program.
Do I get a live person if I call you, Kate?
Yeah, you might. Oh, and the other thing about Parlay, you will get a live person if you click on this button right here, the little help button that floats at the bottom of each page. And there it is. You do get a live person. They'll even tell you what your wait time is. And if I want to request a specific lesson, this is where I go. I start a conversation and I say, hey, I need a lesson on such and such. And then we can go back and forth in the chat, and it's ready for me. So. Yeah.
So like Common Sense Education, we are not paid by Parlay, but I haven't seen it before. I've heard Kate talk about it in sort of theory, and wow, it's fantastic. Who knew? You did. Makes me think of two other things though. One was that in discussing lateral reading, like you do it all the time, didn't know it's called that. When we were talking the other day, you mentioned, and I think it might have been last week, a website that does that for you with news articles where it lines them up next to each other. What was that?
All Sides. So
All
Sides takes news articles and puts 3 columns. So you get a headline from the right, a headline from center media, and a headline from left-leaning media, puts them all next to each other so you can read across and see what's similar and what's different.
Nice. That seems like a good extension of this well. And I thought it was such a great idea, because that, like you said, the lateral reading is a constant for us, for our students, for our classrooms, but great to have that. And I also love that it's teaching it as a discrete skill. Like this is what going back to my point about sort of distancing you from the subject being so inflammatory, that makes me think too about the discrete skill. And I wonder if you would wrap up with this piece of it, but how do you, I can imagine, especially the more challenging the subject matter, that the tendency would be for any conversation, including a parlay conversation, to devolve and sort of become personal or attacking or just inappropriate, and how you've sort of balanced the importance of, or sort of how you've direct instructed around civil discourse and sort of the appropriateness of the way that we speak to each other.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because I actually, different opinions and discussions. So when
I swear, she didn't tell me. We didn't do this in advance.
No, this is really what was going on in my class. Especially last year when we were remote and it was difficult for community building. Was it last year? Yes. And the election cycle was happening and COVID was happening, and it was like all happening. But I wanted to be having discussions with my students that, it's American literature, they're juniors. We need to be talking about how literature is reflecting our culture. And so again, I reached out to Parlay and I said, I need to talk to my students about how we're going to hold these conversations in a civil manner. Can you create something for me? And they created this one, Different Opinions in Discussions. So this one is, today we're going to be discussing how to approach discussions and what it means to listen respectfully to differing opinions. And then we're going to jump into that conversation. Again, they gave me look at all of these, like you can see, like great infographics, lots of videos, teachers talking about it, learning to listen. So they just put all these resources together for my students, put together these incredible discussion questions, and we ran with it. This was probably the first conversation, online conversation that we did. So I do explicitly teach the skill. And last year I did it, last year Parlay explicitly taught the skill, and we all enjoyed what they put together. And that really brought us together as a community, because then you can, if you can see down my screen here, we did talk about voting and democracy, civil conversation challenges. You can see some of the topics that we were talking about. So it was really important that we had this conversation first about how we're going to engage with each other in a respectful way with all of our different perspectives that we bring to the table.
Maybe we wrap up just by echoing something we were talking about in the class we were teaching yesterday, yesterday, that we have both had the experience of being thrown into, in the case we were discussing yesterday, was teaching the tech tool as we teach the subject matter. In this case, teaching the subject matter as we also try to encourage civil discourse. And we both land very strongly around what might feel like, I think some would say a waste of time, but definitely like a sacrifice of time to teach the skill itself as being so beneficial, and that we would both really say to you, that time you invest, even if it feels like, and the example I often give is my 7th grade at Cape Elizabeth does this magnificent, they're new to laptops in 7th grade, they've had iPads until then, and they do a 2-day boot camp. And when they first told me this, I was like, oh my God, that's so great. And at the same time, in the voice in my head was like, how do they give up 2 days of content, 2 full days of every subject, the whole grade? How do they justify that? Well, they justify it because they pick, and I think he had said yesterday, 5 tools. They pick a small group of tools they're going to teach well and deeply, and the norms that are going to go around those, the expectations, and at the same time they use it as opportunity for, I think Kate mentioned yesterday, the sort of like a get to know you focus of it, like learning about people's interests and their sort of experiences and extracurricular activities, that you can combine it with huge value-added aspects that are still separate from your content. And in doing so, you will, again, this is like, for what it's worth, our 2 cents, it is hugely valuable to do so. So I asked that question, I swear, as I said, I did not know that she did this. I guessed that there would have been some norms. I did not know she had a parlay lesson in the left-hand column about it. But this sense of like, this could very easily, as I said at the very beginning of the last session, devolve into a biting back and forth because of the subject matter, given especially some of the topics that voting and democracy on the left-hand side there. And that as you start to think about teaching media literacy, thinking about it as a discrete skill and thinking about the skills that are required to have the conversation is going to get you a lot farther than it would to just dive right in. So for all the ways in which we're saying to you, these lessons are available to really just jump right into them, there are pieces around civil discourse and around sort of reflection, metacognition that would be great partners with this because of, I'm not gonna say the danger, but the opportunity they provide to get into deep water pretty quickly. And so in this particular example, the idea of teaching those discussion skills in addition to as sort of part of your responsibility strikes me as exactly the kind of work that we would both say is well worth doing. A final thought, for those of you that know John Green's name, I was going to mention he's the author of Fault in Our Stars. So I mentioned that because that may be, you're like, why do I know that name? That's why. But one of the things that he does really beautifully in the series of videos is he doesn't capitalize. He's not like, I'm John Green and you love me because. He's far too like, I feel like I'd be such good friends with him. Just
I know.
and he's so delightful, his brother. But the sense of like it's like social capital almost. The video series is very wide ranging that he's created, and they are, like I said about when students are speaking and their lessons are, and their sort of words are more credible, pretty much anything John does in, look at me, he is my best friend. John and I were talking about his crash courses. Anything Mr. Green does in his crash courses you just have automatic buy-in from your students. And he does such great, important things as you look at, Black American history, outbreak science. He'll give you content that itself is really sort of naturally engaging, and then the way they present it and his participation in it is wonderful. So another sort of route to approach any of these questions we've been talking about in the last few weeks is to find a resource like Crash Course. And if you're feeling more, I'll say adventurous, or more sort of like, I can do this on my own, there's the one right in the middle, Navigating Digital Information. He's got 11 videos for you to work from. And if I go back to my point at the very beginning of the last session of finding your people, finding your PLN, I can't recommend to you enough this series in terms of how it works to augment and amplify the messages that you have. And some of it is very sort of hilarious. Like much of it is just very well done and sort of actually the mythology preview is wonderful, right?
That's what I was going to say, was the mythology. Yeah.
Like mythology, oh my gosh, with Myers. And then there's another one around, it's not tropes, but like Bildungsroman and the structures, what was it called? The structures of stories that pre-exist that we...
Oh, archetypes.
Archetype. Hello, English. How are you? Says the English teacher. Archetypes. Thank you. The conversations they have around archetypes are wonderful as well. So just encouraging you to spend some time in that exploration of the right resource for the message. This is just such a good example of that. And to extend what Kate said a moment ago, we are both, because we've had this opportunity to do some of these deep dives, we've now gotten familiar with terrific resources that we'd love to share if you're looking for something specific. So in the same way Kate was suggesting you call it your parlay representative, we would be delighted to try to help you find the right tool, the right resource to share any of these messages. And frankly, anything that we can do to assist you with integrating technology into your classrooms. Okay, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this version. We had this conversation, I guess, 5 or 6 weeks ago now about how might we do this next round differently. And I am very much behind the conversation version, which we hope you guys have enjoyed as well. And look, Penny Kittle's on the left-hand side too. Maybe we leave you with Penny Kittle. All I need to say is the words Penny Kittle. If you need help learning how to teach real good, ask Penny Kittle. She's amazing. So thanks, you guys. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you in September.
Have a great summer.